Commander Andrew Paul received the alert. In his 20 years of service, he had faced countless crises, rogue nations, asteroid threats, even coordinated cyber attacks, but nothing had prepared him for this. The transmission came from deep space, a series of coded pulses that humanity's brightest minds had barely managed to decipher. When the translation came through, it wasn't a plea for peace or an offer of interstellar camaraderie. It was a warning. Prepare for our arrival. Andrew stood on the bridge of the Odyssey, Earth's most advanced orbital station, watching the alien fleet materialize in the distance. Vast, obsidian ships emerged from hyperspace, blotting out the stars with their enormity. Their surfaces shimmered like living metal, and even from millions of miles away, their presence felt oppressive, a physical weight pressing on his chest. "Unbelievable," whispered Dr. Alan Brown, the station's resident xenobiologist. He was a wiry man with perpetually furrowed brows, as though his mind could never quite escape the weight of its own thoughts. "They're ships. It's like they're alive." Lieutenant Jim Wayne, Andrew's second-in-command, leaned forward, his muscular frame taut with tension. "Alive or not, they're in our space, uninvited." "That doesn't sit right with me." Andrew didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the central display, where the alien ships continued to multiply. He finally spoke, his voice calm but steely. "We'll figure out what they want, but we won't let them dictate the terms." A sudden burst of energy surged from the largest ship, a signal aimed directly at Earth. It bypassed every security measure, streaming directly into the Odyssey's communication system. The crew scrambled as an image filled the screen. A towering alien figure, encased in a metallic exoskeleton that glowed with an eerie blue light. Its face was hidden behind an intricate mask, but its eyes, piercing and cold, seemed to cut through the screen, evaluating and dismissing them all in an instant. "I am King Oranax of the Zarnith Dominion," the alien spoke, its voice a chilling amalgamation of grating tones. "I address the inhabitants of this insignificant world." Alan stiffened. "Insignificant?" Oranax continued, unperturbed. "You have clawed your way from the muck, built your fragile empires, and now believe yourselves worthy of recognition. But to us, you are nothing more than insects." The bridge fell silent, the weight of the insult sinking in. Andrew's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to remain composed. "Insects," Oranax repeated, his tone laced with contempt. "You scurry about, unaware of the greater powers in this universe. Your existence offends us. Your persistence disgusts us. We offer you a single choice. Submit to the Zarnith Dominion and accept your place as our servants, or face annihilation." The screen flickered, and a horrifying display replaced Oranax's visage. The image showed a planet, alien but not unlike Earth, reduced to a smoldering wasteland. Cities had been vaporized, oceans boiled away, leaving nothing but a barren husk. Jim slammed his fist on the console. "They're trying to scare us." "It's not just intimidation," Alan murmured, his voice barely audible. "It's a promise." Andrew stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "King Oranax," he said, addressing the screen as if the alien could hear him. "This is Earth, and we don't bow to tyrants. If you think we'll roll over and submit, you don't understand us." For a moment, there was no response. Then Oranax's face reappeared, his expression unreadable. Defiance from vermin. Amusing. He leaned closer, his glowing eyes narrowing. "You will regret this insolence." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in heavy silence. Andrew turned to his crew, his expression grim but resolute. "Prep the station's defenses. Alert the Global Council. If they want to fight, they'll get one. But we're not going down without showing them what humanity is capable of." As the crew scrambled into action, Andrew allowed himself a brief moment to reflect. The Zarniths weren't just an advanced alien race. They were a threat unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Their arrogance was infuriating, but it was also dangerous. If humanity had any chance of survival, It would require unity, ingenuity, and an unshakable will to fight. Andrew turned back to the display, where the alien fleet loomed like a shadow over Earth. Insects, he muttered under his breath. We'll see who squashes who. In the quiet hum of the station, the challenge had been set. The Earth, fragile and divided as it often was, now faced a common enemy. And for Andrew Paul, the insult wasn't just an affront. It was a call to action. The Global Council convened within hours of the Zarnata's broadcast, its members scattered across holographic displays in a tense, hurried meeting. Andrew Paul stood in the center of the Odyssey's command chamber, the weight of Earth's defense resting heavily on his shoulders. Across the Council's faces, there was a mixture of fear, disbelief, and simmering anger, emotions that mirrored his own. They called us insects, President Harlow of the North American Union began, her voice brittle but firm. And now they're demanding we surrender everything we've built, everything we are. What's your assessment, Commander Paul? Andrew straightened, his tone clipped and professional. The Zarnats have made their position clear. They're not interested in diplomacy or coexistence, submission or destruction. Those are the options they've given us. And if we resist, a representative from the African Federation asked, his voice low, as though afraid of the answer. They'll make good on their threats, Andrew replied. The fleet they brought into orbit is unlike anything we've seen. Our intelligence estimates their firepower could level half the planet in a single strike. A grim silence followed. Then, breaking the tension, Jim Wayne spoke from just off camera, his voice carrying the bluntness Andrew had come to rely on. So what? We just roll over and let them chain us up? That's not humanity. We fight. We always fight. Fighting isn't bravery if it's futile. Another voice cut in, this one sharper, belonging to General Sal of the Eastern Bloc. We have no data on their weaknesses, no way to counter their technology. Do you suggest we throw lives at them until they tire of killing us? Andrew stepped in, his commanding presence silencing the growing discord. We need a plan, not defeatism or reckless bravado. Our survival hinges on two things: understanding their technology and buying enough time to use it against them. Dr. Allen Brown raised a tentative hand, his voice quiet but urgent. There's another factor we're overlooking: psychology. Their arrogance isn't just cultural, it's strategic. They see us as inferior, which means they'll underestimate us. That might be the only advantage we have. The Council mulled this over. But before any consensus could form, the room's lights flickered and alarms blared. Andrew snapped his attention to the main console, where a junior officer's panicked voice rang out. They're targeting our communication satellites. 2 down already, more under fire. The Zarnat fleet is mobilizing. The Council's holograms flickered as connections faltered, leaving only static. Andrew clenched his fists, his voice cutting through the chaos. They've made their move. Get me a tactical feed on their ships and prepare countermeasures. Jim was already at the weapons station, barking orders to the station's crew. All defensive arrays online. If they want to start this now, let's give them hell. Through the viewing port, Earth's orbit lit up with bursts of light as the Zarnats obliterated satellites with surgical precision. They weren't attacking cities yet. This was a display of dominance, a warning wrapped in firepower. Andrew knew it wouldn't stop there. They're testing us, Allen said, his voice taut with dread. Seeing if we'll panic or retaliate. Then we show them we're not afraid, Andrew replied. He keyed the station-wide comms. All personnel, this is Commander Paul. The Zarnat fleet has initiated hostilities. This is no longer a standoff. It's a war. Every man and woman here has a part to play. We defend this planet, no matter the cost. The station buzzed with activity, the crew falling into their roles with practiced efficiency. Even amidst the chaos, there was an undercurrent of determination, a refusal to let the Zarnat superiority dictate their fate. But as Andrew watched the tactical display, his gut churned. The Zarnats were too powerful, too advanced. They had come not to negotiate, but to dominate, and humanity's best efforts might not be enough. A sudden flash of light caught his attention, brighter than the others. On the screen, one of Earth's major cities, Shanghai, erupted into flames. The Zarnets had struck their first blow against the planet itself. The destruction was immediate and absolute, a vivid reminder of the stakes they faced. Jim slammed a fist against the console, his face a mask of fury. That's it. No more waiting. Let's hit them with everything we've got. Not yet, Andrew said firmly, though the decision tore at him. We need to be smart about this. If we act out of anger, we lose. Jim turned, his voice rising. People are dying down there. How much longer are we supposed to wait? As long as it takes to ensure what we do next matters, Andrew shot back. His voice softened, but the steel in his gaze remained. I'm angry too, Jim. But anger won't save lives. Strategy will. The tension between them eased, though Jim's frustration didn't dissipate. Andrew understood. He felt it too, but as the leader, he couldn't afford to let emotions dictate his decisions. Another transmission came through, this one patched directly to the station's comms. Oranax's face appeared once more, his expression smug. Do you see now, Commander? Resistance is futile. This display was but a fraction of our might. Surrender your world, and I may yet spare what remains. Andrew stepped forward, his voice cold and measured. You've underestimated us, Oranax. Humanity doesn't break under pressure. You want to conquer us? You'll have to fight for every inch. Oranax tilted his head, his glowing eyes narrowing. So be it. Let the extermination begin. The transmission ended, and the station fell silent, the weight of the declaration hanging heavy in the air. Andrew turned to his crew, his voice steady but resolute. This is what we've been preparing for. They think we're weak. Let's show them just how wrong they are. The crew responded with grim determination, each member throwing themselves into their tasks with renewed vigor. For Andrew, the moment felt both impossibly vast and sharply personal. The Zarnets had declared war, but humanity wouldn't just fight for survival. They would fight for their right to exist on their own terms. Andrew stared out at the distant alien fleet, his mind already racing through strategies and contingencies. This wasn't just a battle of technology or firepower. It was a battle of wills. And if there was one thing humanity had in abundance, it was the will to endure. The battlefield was no longer confined to Earth's orbit. The war had spilled into every corner of the solar system. Fleets clashed in bursts of fiery brilliance as humanity's hastily unified defenses fought desperately to hold the line. Andrew Paul stood at the helm of the Odyssey, his face illuminated by the chaotic tapestry of explosions and streaking energy bolts on the tactical display. Despite the odds, Earth was not yielding. Reports of losses poured in. Shattered orbital platforms, disabled frigates, and cities burning under Zarnet bombardments. Yet, alongside those grim updates came sparks of defiance. A Zarnet cruiser down by a daring strike from a Terran fighter wing. An alien landing craft obliterated before it could touch ground. Humanity's resistance was fierce, but Andrew knew it wasn't enough. They're adapting too quickly, Dr. Alan Brown said, his voice taut with exhaustion. Every tactic we deploy, they counter within hours. We're holding on by sheer willpower, but that won't last. It's worse than that, Jim Wayne interjected, his tone sharp and impatient. They're toying with us. Look at their movements. They're testing our limits, not reaching theirs. He gestured toward the display, where alien ships maneuvered with precision, their formations tightening like a noose around Earth. If we don't hit back hard and soon, they'll crush us outright. Andrew didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied the display, his mind racing. Jim was right. The Zarnets were playing a long game, grinding them down while conserving their strength. Humanity's stubbornness was admirable, but it wouldn't win this war. They needed a breakthrough, something decisive. Alan broke the silence, his voice tinged with reluctant excitement. Maybe we've been looking at this the wrong way. What if we focus not on their ships, but on their command structure? The Zarnists don't behave like us. Their forces act with an almost hive-like coordination. If we disrupt that... Jim caught on immediately. Take out their king. His grin was grim. Cut off the head. The body dies. It's a theory, Alan said cautiously, but a strong one. Everything we've seen suggests King Oranax isn't just their leader. He's their linchpin. Their ships, their soldiers, even their strategies all seem to stem from him. If we neutralize him, we could throw their entire operation into chaos. Andrew's eyes narrowed, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Targeting Oranax wasn't just risky, it was suicidal. The king's flagship was a fortress, surrounded by the heaviest defenses in the Zarna fleet. But if Alan was right, it might be their only chance. Do we have a way in? Andrew asked finally, his tone clipped and focused. Alan hesitated, then nodded. We've intercepted fragments of their transmissions. Their encryption is advanced, but if we can piggyback on their communications network, we might be able to pinpoint weaknesses in their defenses. It'll take time. Time we don't have, Andrew interrupted. Jim, assemble a strike team. I want our best pilots and operatives ready to move the second we find an opening. You got it, Jim said, already moving toward the comm station. The next hours were a blur of frantic preparation. Alan worked tirelessly, his fingers flying across his console as he decrypted Zarna's signals and mapped out their fleet's movements. Meanwhile, Jim drilled the strike team, pushing them to the brink of exhaustion to ensure they were ready for what lay ahead. Finally, the breakthrough came. Alan called Andrew and Jim to the command deck, his face pale but triumphant. I've found it. Their communications relay is centralized aboard Oranax's ship. If we take it out, we can blind their entire fleet and open a path to the king. Jim let out a low whistle. That's one hell of a target. It's also heavily fortified, Alan warned. We'll have one shot at this. If we fail... We won't, Andrew said firmly. He turned to Jim. You and I will lead the assault. Alan, you stay here and coordinate the attack. We'll need every second of your expertise to pull this off. The team launched within the hour, their small fleet slipping through the chaos of battle under the cover of Earth's remaining orbital defenses. Andrew piloted the lead ship, his hands steady on the controls despite the pounding of his heart. Beside him, Jim monitored their approach, his usual bravado tempered by the gravity of the mission. As they neared Oranax's flagship, the scale of the enemy's defenses became clear. The ship was a colossus, its surface bristling with weapons and shield generators. Surrounding it was a swarm of Zarna fighters, their sleek forms darting like predators around a kill. Here we go, Andrew muttered. He keyed the comms. All units, engage at will. Focus on drawing their fire away from the relay. We'll handle the rest. The battle that followed was a blur of chaos and precision. Human fighters weaved through enemy formations, their weapons blazing as they targeted weak points in the Zarnit defenses. Andrew and Jim led the charge, their ships carving a path toward the relay with ruthless efficiency. Finally, they reached their target. The relay loomed ahead, a massive structure glowing with energy. Andrew's voice was calm but urgent as he gave the order. Target the relay's core. Take it out, and we cripple their fleet. The team unleashed everything they had, their weapons tearing into the relay's defenses. Zarna fighters swarmed them, but the humans held their ground, their determination outweighing the odds. A blinding explosion signaled their success. The relay shattered, its fragments spiraling into the void. The Zarna fleet faltered, their movements suddenly disjointed. Andrew seized a moment. Move on Oranax's ship. Now's our chance. The strike team surged forward, their ships converging on the king's flagship. The final assault had begun. Andrew's focus sharpened. Every decision a calculated step toward their ultimate goal. Humanity's survival depended on this moment, and he would see it through to the end. The Zarnef flagship loomed before them, its dark hull glowing with the eerie light of energy, shield still intact despite the chaos. Andrew Paul guided his fighter with precision, the weight of the mission pressing down on him as the strike team maneuvered into position. Every second counted. The destruction of the communications relay had thrown the Zarnef fleet into confusion, but the reprieve wouldn't last. Energy signatures spiking. Alan's voice came through the comms, tense but steady. He was coordinating from the Odyssey. They're reconfiguring. That shield won't stay down long. Then we'll make it count, Andrew replied, his voice resolute. Jim, you're with me on the breach. Everyone else, keep their defenses off us. Roger that, Commander, Jim said, his tone sharp with anticipation. Andrew's fighter blasted toward the flagship, weaving through a storm of enemy fire. The rest of the strike team followed, their formation tight, as they targeted weak points in the shield matrix. Explosions erupted across the flagship's hull, but the vessel held firm, its defenses relentless. Direct hit on the shield generator, a pilot reported. The flagship's shields flickered, then collapsed in a cascade of sparks. Andrew seized the opening. Breach team, move in. He and Jim landed their ships in tandem on the flagship's hull, their docking mechanisms latching onto an exposed airlock. The team followed quickly, disembarking in full combat gear. The interior of the ship was a labyrinth of metallic corridors, pulsating with blue energy that seemed alive. Stay tight, Andrew ordered. Alan, guide us to the command center. Uploading coordinates now, Alan replied. Expect heavy resistance. Resistance came quickly. Zarnef warriors, clad in their biomechanical armor, poured into the corridors, their weapons unleashing bursts of searing plasma. The strike team returned fire, their training and determination pushing them forward. Andrew led the charge, his rifle cutting through the alien ranks with ruthless efficiency. Beside him, Jim fought like a man possessed, his every move a testament to humanity's unyielding spirit. This way, Andrew called, gesturing toward a branching corridor. The team pressed on, their progress marked by the scorched remains of their enemies. The command center was a cavernous chamber at the heart of the ship, dominated by a towering throne-like structure. Sitting atop it was King Oranax, his massive frame encased in the same glowing exoskeleton seen in the transmissions. His glowing eyes fixed on the intruders with a mix of fury and disdain. Insects, Oranax snarled, rising from his throne. You dare set foot upon my vessel? You defile the sanctity of the Zarnef dominion. Andrew stepped forward, his weapon trained on the alien king. You brought this war to us, Oranax. Now we're here to end it. Oranax laughed, a grating mechanical sound. End it? You overestimate your kind, Commander. Your defiance is admirable but futile. You will kneel before me, or you will die. The battle that followed was brutal and unrelenting. Oranax moved with terrifying speed, his exoskeleton enhancing his strength and reflexes to inhuman levels. He tore through the strike team's ranks, his energy blade leaving devastation in its wake. Andrew and Jim fought with everything they had, their combined efforts barely enough to keep the king at bay. Jim landed a glancing blow on Oranax's armor, but the king retaliated with a vicious strike that sent him crashing into a wall. Jim, Andrew shouted, his focus momentarily faltering. I'm fine, Jim groaned, pulling himself up. Just finish this. With a renewed surge of determination, Andrew charged at Oranax, his weapon blazing. The alien king parried, but Andrew pressed the attack, exploiting every opening. Finally, a well-placed shot shattered a critical node in Oranax's exoskeleton, causing the king to stagger. Now, Jim yelled, throwing his last explosive charge at Oranax. The device detonated, engulfing the king in a blinding explosion. When the smoke cleared, Oranax lay motionless, his armor cracked and broken. Andrew approached cautiously, his weapon still trained on the alien. Oranax's glowing eyes flickered, his voice a distorted whisper. You think this changes anything? The Zarnef will not stop. No, Andrew said coldly. But you will? He fired a final shot, silencing the king for good. The strike team stood in stunned silence, their victory hard-won and surreal. Andrew turned to Jim, who was leaning heavily against the wall but still grinning. Well, Jim said, his voice hoarse, that was one hell of a fight. We're not done yet, Andrew replied. Alan, the king is down. How's the fleet looking? Disarray, Alan reported. Without Oranax, their coordination is falling apart. This might be our only chance to finish them. Andrew nodded. Set the flagship to self-destruct. We're sending a message. The team worked quickly, planting charges throughout the command center. As they evacuated, Andrew paused, glancing back at Oranax's lifeless form. The Zarnith king had been a symbol of terror, but now he was nothing more than a charred husk. Back on the Odyssey, the crew watched as the flagship erupted in a massive explosion, its fragments scattering into the void. The Zarnith fleet, leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat. In the aftermath, Andrew stood on the station's observation deck, staring out at the wreckage of the battle. Humanity had paid a heavy price, but they had survived. For now, that was enough. Jim joined him, his arm in a sling but his grin intact. We did it, he said. Andrew nodded. Yeah, but this isn't over. The Zarnith will come back. We need to be ready. We will be, Jim said confidently. They called us insects. They thought we were weak. Now they know better. Andrew allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had faced extinction and emerged victorious. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Earth would never kneel. In the days following the destruction of the Zarnith flagship, Earth's orbit was eerily quiet. Debris floated like silent witnesses to the conflict, a grim reminder of the battle fought and the lives lost. On the Odyssey, the crew worked tirelessly to rebuild, but for Andrew Paul, the weight of their victory lingered heavier than the cost. In the command center, Jim Wayne stood beside him, his usual humor subdued as they reviewed reports. We won the fight, Andrew, but there's no telling how long the silence will last. Andrew nodded, his gaze fixed on the holographic map of the solar system. The Zarnith will regroup. They may be disorganized without Oranax, but they're not gone. This was only the first battle in a war we didn't ask for. Jim chuckled dryly. Well, if they come back, we'll just have to remind them what happened to their king. I hear the crew's already calling that crater the Oranax Memorial. Andrew managed a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. We burned his skeleton to send a message, Jim. But it's not just for them. It's for us. Humanity needs to know we can stand against even the strongest enemies. Speaking of messages, Jim said, glancing at the comms panel, what's the plan? Do we keep this under wraps or broadcast it across the stars? Andrew considered this, his jaw tightening. We'll release what we need to keep morale high. The people deserve to know we fought back and won. But as far as the galaxy is concerned, we're not making ourselves a bigger target than we already are. Jim leaned back, crossing his arms. Smart move. Let them wonder what happened to their invincible king. Andrew turned, the faint hum of the Odyssey's systems filling the room. We'll need every advantage we can get. Alan's analyzing the data we recovered from the Zarnith systems. If we're lucky, we'll find something we can use to strengthen our defenses. Or hit them first, if it comes to that. Jim smirked, clapping him on the shoulder. I like the sound of that. Let's make sure the next fight ends the same way, with us standing and them burning. Andrew's expression hardened, determination radiating from him. They called us insects, Jim. Now, they know what happens when humanity refuses to crawl.